to the first design news interview that we're doing today. It's going to be with Jeff Escalante, who's a developer at Carrot Creative. So Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
I'm a developer at Guimarin Creative.
What kind of got you there?
Like the story?
Yeah, a little bit of the story.
The whole life story? You just want it all?
Just go for it.
Okay. Well, I grew up in a small town outside of Boston called Nita, and I didn't really do anything extraordinary in my childhood whatsoever, but I managed to pick up some Photoshop early on in my life. And so, you know, having design and people who could design stuff is always in demand, as I'm sure you know yourself. And I just, you know, kept tinkering with that on and off through high school and through college. One summer in college I had an internship that was really boring, and I thought it would be great. I was a neuroscience major, so I was working at a neuro lab, and I thought this would be a super interesting internship. And it was not. It was like, you know, Excel spreadsheets and like, you know, making copies of stuff. It was just like the most boring stuff you can imagine for an internship. I mean, I guess a standard internship. Just thought it might amount to more. But anyway, I just cranked through those things as quick as I possibly could because it was boring and stupid. I just wanted to get it finished. And then I was like, all right, and I copied all your papers. I like filed all your crap. Like, you give me some real work now? And they're like, actually, that's all we had for you.
Oh, wow.
The internship, you don't have to come in anymore.
Oh, wow.
So I had like most of the summer just to do whatever I want. And coincidentally at that time, a friend of mine who I'd done design work for had referred me to someone and said I could make a website for them. Meanwhile, I could not. But when they asked me, I was like, yep,
of course.
Totally could do that. Yeah, no problem, right? Having a couple of months ahead of me, I knew what I was getting myself into. I thought it was, and you know, I was confident I could make it look good whether or not it worked very well. And thankfully, this first client that I had was not very aware of how well it worked, and so I really barely pulled it together, you know, just Googling stuff about CSS. I remember that I actually had to make a decision at the beginning of this work of whether I should be using tables or CSS for my layout. And it was like a big debate on the internet. You know?
Oh yeah. I remember that time too. It was like, because I was originally taught web design in tables. And
oh really?
And
so
now
you
went
the whole table route.
Yeah.
I never went the table route. I like was looking it up and it was like, seemed like the general opinion was like, probably CSS is like the way it'll go in the future. And I'm glad I chose that path looking back on it now. So I hacked some stuff together and got this website out. And, you know, it was terrible. It probably only worked in one browser. I don't think it worked well in that browser, you know, even at that. But the person loved it. It looked really pretty. That was what they were after.
Nice. Well, it was
pretty looking, you know, website. It was like a sunset and like it was ridiculous. So they referred me to a few other people, and that was how I got started doing freelance work, which continued all throughout the rest of college. So just something I was doing in my free time.
But you majored in college in, what was it, neuroscience?
It was neuroscience, yeah. So I'd never taken a single course or had any formal education in design or code whatsoever. It was, and you know, I don't regret it at all. I think it would have been a waste of time. You know, the stuff that they teach in schools is not the same stuff that I know right now at all. Like none of it. You know, I'm not writing algorithms. You know, I'm not executing print design. It's a totally different realm. And so I think my weird, you know, strange free time freelance education served its purpose. And when it came to the end of school, it was, you know, time for me to figure out what I should do with my life. And it wasn't too tough a decision for me because the stuff that I did in my free time, you know, I like doing it, which is why I spent my free time doing it. And that was, you know, designing stuff and writing code and building things. And so that was the first thing that I looked into jobs for. And by pure chance, it turns out the job market was starved for that kind of stuff. And now it's like, you know, anyone going into those fields is just bound to get lots of job offers, if they're qualified and have any experience. And now that I'm looking to hire people, I know that it's really is difficult to find people who legitimately know what they're doing, and there's such a high demand for it. So I got really lucky with that. The stars aligned. It was the right time for it. I had the right education. I poured hours and hours and hours into making a portfolio to use for my application because I had no credentials to my name whatsoever.
You had a neuroscience degree.
Right. I just had nothing. I never had any formal experience doing anything. And so the only thing I could show was a portfolio that I'd have to build myself. And so I spent tons and tons of time on that all throughout my senior year and finally finished it up. And it's probably so ghetto looking right now. As it happens every 5 years that pass, within
it was the beginning.
Within web trends, look back another couple of years as GeoCities.
You're like,
I want to bring that back too. That's the next.
GeoCities is actually just relaunched a month ago, I think.
No, that was actually another guy who had just made a sort of clone of it.
Oh, okay.
It was a similar project. It's we'll give you a small amount of space to host a static website. And just because it had the same spirit, a lot of people have been putting up old school style websites on this host.
Yeah.
I really like that project though. It's definitely something worth following. I forget what it's called. Maybe you can find it in post-production or something.
I'll throw it up on post-production.
But yeah, it's a really funny project. Fashion is cyclical, and who knows, maybe we'll come back to it. I've seen there's someone who modded Bootstrap to be GeoCities themed, and it's just outrageous. It's just this stupid under construction, gifs everywhere.
It's a good look back on the design about this is where we all started from, and now we really transitioned to this type of media.
I think it's funny. I always love looking back at that stuff. And some people get bothered by it, and they get bothered by trends and fashion and stuff. But it's always fun to look at. But anyway, that was my ghetto portfolio, and it got me far enough to get an internship at least.
Yeah, get your foot in the door and get started.
Yeah. No one was ready to give me a full-time job, so they're never taken any class of design, never taken any classes, never had any internships. But
Awesome. So I've noticed you're really active on designer news. And what other online communities do you participate in, or do you feel are really relevant to what you're doing?
It's mostly Hacker News and Designer News. Hacker News was around first, and it's been around for a while, and it's great. I check it compulsively. Whenever I have downtime, I'm looking at that instead of wasting time somewhere else like Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I guess it's probably a good thing though, right? I'd rather be reading news about technology and code and things that are happening within my realm than just wasting time, playing games or looking at what my old high school friends I don't care about are doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's mostly Hacker News and Designer News. And GitHub is a good place to be, but you kind of build your own communities on there. Okay. It's not here's the feed that everyone looks at of what's going on. It's more what projects are you involved with and what's going on in those projects. So it's more of a personal thing.
More customizable.
Yeah, and I do monitor a lot of things on GitHub, and I'm involved in discussing issues, but they're mostly technical and code related rather than news.
My next question from there is, how do you see the best way for students, people with early development, early design, really being more involved in the community?
So getting involved in a community, as you know, is a matter of hustling your way in at the beginning, putting in a little extra work to make sure that you're involved in what's going on.
Yeah.
Or something like Designer News or Hacker News, that you're reading articles, you're posting responses where you think you have an interesting thought. If you find something interesting, adding it in there. And it's pretty difficult to get them to get voted up, but that's a whole other part of science. that's separate. But also, I think a big part of it is doing good work yourself. There's one point at which I had a project at work that was really slow. It was a terrible project, but it was this e-commerce site that was really huge and slow, and it took so long to do anything. And so I spent a lot of time on Twitter because there were just these in-between times where it'd be compiling or deploying or trying to start up the app, which would be really lengthy process. And so I'd just be all right, I have a few minutes while it's going to work on this. God, that's terrible. And I was like on Twitter a lot, and I was interacting a lot more with people. I was like, getting more followers, doing all these things. And there's a certain point at which I was like, you could either spend your time like on Twitter to try to like get more popular on Twitter, or you could spend your time doing other work outside of Twitter to get more popular on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
And like there's only so far you can go, and there's so much work you have to get, put in to like get more people involved and get more involved in other people's feeds. And if that's something you like to do and you want to do, then that's fine. But I figured, the people that really are, have the biggest followings and have most people paying attention to them and replying to what they say are not people that spend a lot of time on Twitter. They're people that spend a lot of time doing awesome things that are not in any way involved with Twitter.
Yeah.
And for that reason, people are interested in that work. And so I feel like there's a certain balance to getting involved in communities and to doing good work on your own. And I think that what's going to get you the farthest in terms of, popularity and having people interested in what you want to say and things like that, if that's what you're after, is not spending your time, all your time in the community, but rather spending your time doing great work. And if you do great work, that's what people will be interested in, the stuff that you do. Mm-hmm. And when you'll have enough to talk about, because you're interested in the work too, presumably, if you're spending a lot of time on it. And so I think there's an element of striking a balance between the two. And there's an element of, when you have downtime, making sure to get on Twitter. And if there are people that you're interested in, you can learn a lot from what they say. Mm-hmm. And getting involved with them will definitely get you benefits.
Well, and on top of that, I noticed you posted this, because during the whole flat design period, there was all this discussion on designer news about flat design, like how good that is, and how it was a trend or was it not a trend. And you posted this article about long shadow design.
Yep.
Can you kind of walk us through where that kind of came from?
Sure, yeah. So it was a joke, first of all. It turned out not to actually be a joke in real life, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. But, the whole flat design thing is just ridiculous. It's like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, you design, you make good stuff. It doesn't matter if you have gradients on it, if you don't have gradients on it. Like, as the principles of design are there, and if you're following them, it'll look good. And if you're not, it won't look good. And so people spend all this time trying to like define what was flat and what wasn't flat, and and then there are a lot of people who are like of the same opinion of like, who cares what's flat and what's not flat, you're all idiots. And so there are all these articles coming up of like both of these sides like not directly engaging with each other, just like, here's all the people trying to discuss what flat design is. Here's all these people writing articles about how stupid those people are. And it just kept like surfacing, and like it just was ridiculous. I guess there's not that much designer news compared to hacker news.
Yeah,
right? The articles that come up there's not as many. There's a lot more things going in.
It's a nerd community too, so it's still building and getting.
Right, it definitely is. And so sometimes designers don't have anything to talk about, and so they just create drama and like silly stuff. And so I noticed like these long shadow things. Like a couple of them were popping up on Dribble, and like me and some of my friends and coworkers were seeing this stuff, and we're like, wouldn't it be ridiculous if they like wrote an article? Like for example, there's Layer Vault who was pushing flatter things for a while. They wrote this like canonical article on flat design era, and like everyone was crazy about it. And they've like laid claim to flat design, which is entirely ridiculous. So, I really like both of those guys, Alan and Kelly. But like, let's be honest.
As long as it's design well.
No one's laying claim to anything. It's completely silly that they can like write an article and be like, yeah, I invented flat design. It's like, no, you didn't. Just like wrote a stupid article. I'm sorry if either of them are watching this. I apologize. But so I decided to write a stupid article. As more of like a mock of like the fact that
a parody of like what's happening.
Yeah, a parody of like design trends and inventing design trends and all the ridiculous stuff that's going on around it. And I wrote the article clearly not in like serious terms, whatsoever. It was just ridiculous. And me and my friend were working on this, and he did the header for it, with this long shadow, classic like look. And so we put this up, and I thought maybe a couple people would get a few chuckles out of it, and that would be it. But really, a lot of people liked it, and it was crazy. just tons of views coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Like right after I dropped that article, I went on vacation, so I wasn't really like, I guess that wasn't a good idea, but I think so, but like I would like, you know, get an internet connection and some like cafe every couple of days and there'd just be this stream of like, you know, tweets coming in and people like,
oh wow,
this is so stupid, and like, oh, this is so great, like check out this like dribble shot I did. I was like, oh my god, this is just ridiculous. And so I came back a couple weeks later and it was just
kind of, did you feel like you created a monster?
Really out of hand, like, you know, yeah, I'm sort of like half and half, because some people are like, you know, I can't believe what you've done. Look at all these people doing long shadow designs now, like, what's wrong with you? And I'm just like, it's not my fault, you know? If you're gonna like read a joke article and like take it seriously, and then that's fine. Like, I'm not gonna complain about it. Like, I don't think it's something worth complaining about. Just like I don't think flat design is worth complaining about. It's like, you just make whatever design you want, and if it looks good, then people are gonna like it, and if it doesn't, people aren't gonna like it. You know, there's no way around that. You know, use as many or as few trends as you want. Like, when it comes down to it, it's just design quality is what's gonna win out. So I don't see any use in like complaining about seeing too much of this or not enough of that. So I've had a couple people like engage with me on that front. And I'm just like, just don't let it bother you. Like, it's just a joke, you know. And when you see it, you're like, ha, that's ridiculous, you know. And that's it, you know.
And you could be like, haha, it was a joke originally, but you're taking it seriously. And I know that because I read the original article.
Sure, right, you know. Or you can, you know, maybe it's a style you really like, and if that's your thing, then it's totally fine. You know, it's a cool looking thing, and that's why people were using it. So
yeah,
I just don't see any reason to like get up in arms about it or anything really within the strange design drama community. So just out of it, and it's like, here it is, take it or leave it, and that's where we're gonna.
There's a lot of talk about, you know, should people be all design? People should be all developers? Should we try to find a balance between the two? Or, you know, where should people try to be striving for in that kind of situation?
Sure, right. So when you are thinking about design and development, there's a lot of overlap between the two, and there's been a lot of debate over a long period of time whether every designer should know development or every developer should know how to do basic design stuff. And I think that all of that is silly, really. It depends on what kind of person you are, rather than what someone who wrote an article on the internet thinks you should do. And so if you're the kind of person that is more focused on one thing and wants to, and is really passionate about that one thing, like maybe let's use design as an example, and you want to take that as far as possible, like maybe like a PhD student, you know, there's a certain type of person who would be a PhD student. It's not somebody who gets bored with things quickly and wants to master, you know, a lot of different trades. It's somebody who really is focused on one thing, that is super interested in, they're really passionate and want to take it as far as they possibly can. And so, if that's the kind of person that you are, then it's not going to be beneficial to you to learn development. You know, it's not something that's super interesting to you. It's not going to help you out with getting as far as you can on the thing that you are super interested in. And so I don't think it will serve you any benefit to listen to other people's advice in that respect. On the other hand, if you are someone who's trying to broaden your horizons, you're not trying to be the, you know, best designer of all time, best developer of all time. You want to learn more things. You know, you want to become a web designer rather than just a pure graphic designer. You're going to need to broaden out your horizons a little bit and learn some of those things. Of course, as long as they're interesting to you. And so I think that anything is worth trying. You know, dipping your toes in for a little bit and seeing if it's something that interests you. And if it is, then absolutely, you know, move on with it, move forward, and keep working on it, because it'll only benefit you to know more about the environment in which your designs are going to be applied, or to be able to make whatever code products you have, you know, look better and work better for users. But at the same time, if it's not something that's really interesting to you and you're trying to having to like pull yourself through it, you know, there's no way that's something you should follow. And so I feel like that advice can apply to almost anything. It's just you know, always worth giving a shot. And if it's something you like, then continue with it. If it's not, then don't force yourself through it. I know there's so many people that continue trying to force themselves through it because it's what this person says or it's what this employer recommends, but you never should listen to that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really about self-development or just being like, what do I need to reach my final goal or whatever that is.
Yeah, there's always people that are super passionate about anything. And if you're just trying to pull yourself through to reach a goal or meet an end, you're going to get the pants beaten off you by the people who actually care about it.
Yeah.
And so it's best to put yourself as far ahead as you can by working on things that you care about. And if that's one thing, then spend your time on that one thing. If there's a lot of things you care about, I would say that I fall in that camp certainly. I'm not great at any one thing. I just like having a lot of different things that I know how to do. Then that's equally valid. So.
Yeah. So kind of an offshoot of that are these number of products that are coming out. There's Macaw, Brackets, and Adobe has things, Adobe Flow. That's for Reflow or something along those lines.
Yeah, I did say that.
So how do you view those, first as a developer, but also as someone who knows more about design? Do you think those are good or helpful, or how do you see those like shaping the community in the future?
Sure. So the first two you mentioned, Brackets and Macaw. Brackets I think is more developer oriented. The demo I saw of that at least, and I certainly am not well educated in either of the two, but the demo I saw was more like a tool that allowed you to pull up a PSD alongside your code and kind of draw links between the two, rather than taking your PSD, cutting up your PSD, moving your files into a folder, and pulling up your code editor, typing in file names. It is kind of a tedious process, and so making that link easier between the end of your design and the start of your development, I think, is definitely a useful niche to fill. The only thing that bothers me a little bit about it is just the lack of support for more higher level languages. I never write in HTML and CSS anymore, just vanilla. And I don't think that any serious full-time developer does these days, because you can get so much more powerful tools and so much more quicker and more flexible work if you use preprocessors. And so the lack of support for those bothers me a little bit, just because it wouldn't be useful to me at all. I can get through my sites much faster manually cutting the images out and dropping in a folder, as long as I have my preprocessors at my fingertips.
Yeah.
So it's negligible how far that'll get us. But again, that's something that Adobe might realize and build in support for, and if they do, I think it'll be useful. I don't think it'll be very useful to designers based on what I've seen. It'll just help out developers at the beginning stages. For Macaw, I like that one a lot. This popped up recently, I think, within the last week or so.
Yeah. The screencast did, yeah, for sure.
Right, yeah. So that looks like a great tool. I think the most important piece of that is just allowing designers to design responsibly, which is not something we have right now. Every time a designer starts up a new design, you get out your canvas, put it to like 960 or 1200, draw your grid lines on, and then if you want to have a responsive design, it's a matter of making an entirely new PSD, copying your stuff over, like resizing, rearranging, and this is just not right. It's
the wrong flow.
It's not really responsive. You end up with 2 or 3 separate screens. You don't end up with something that's fluid. And as developers, it's the opposite approach that we're taking. Everything has to be fluid. It has to be based on percentages. It needs to work on a huge variety of screens that will just continue to increase. Maybe down to like a watch, or up to like a gigantic stadium TV. So having that flexibility there, I think, is super important, and that's a tool that I think primarily will allow designers it will give designers another step after their PSD mocks, They'll make their cuts. I think that people will start using more SVGs these days. That's something that I dived all in on my last project. Didn't use any JPEGs, it was only SVGs. I'm not regretting that one bit. I think that's going to be how it goes in the future always, because clean, flexible graphics are the only way you can support the growing variety of different resolutions you need to adapt to. So I feel like it's going to be a step like doing out your static mocks just to have them there, making your cuts, having flexible graphics, and then going into this second program, which may be Macaw or maybe something else, who knows, and devising how it's going to respond at different widths. And as a designer, I think the power to do that would be great, because at this point, you kind of lay down your design, and then something happens to it, and then you have like this result that like really was a lot of like interpolation between your different states that's made up by a developer. So being able to get more involved there, I think, is definitely going to be useful. In terms of the code it puts out, it's the same issue with Brackets. it puts out static HTML and CSS. Well, I think this is useful for like a prototype. Maybe you could show a client like, here's how the design would look. They could resize and see all of the adaptations. I don't see it being something that would be taken and ported directly into production code unless there's a lot of extra work put in behind the scenes to make it developer friendly, that we could engineer the code it puts out to look the way that we need it to.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Yes, this is the Designer News Network, where my personal mission for this has been trying to create a tool or a better way to help students or early young designers and developers, what's happening in the industry via, weekly events, also these type of interviews. Do you see a lot of opportunity for that in the future, or where do you see currently design education as it is, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I think this is a great cause. Here I am giving you my support, and all of you guys as well. Like I mentioned way back in the beginning, there's definitely not a lot of resources. I mean, it's growing very quickly, but there hasn't been a lot of resources for people trying to learn how to get into modern design and design for the web and application design. And so I think that any resources out there will certainly help a lot. We've seen a bunch spring up recently. Things like Udacity, Coursera, a wide range of online courses for a bunch of topics, which is great.
Yeah.
But they also have ones for design, ones for intro to computer science, which I think is just so huge for everyone. From people who are at home, trying to get their feet wet with designer development, or for people that honestly just don't have the resources to get to a university and take these courses. It makes a huge difference. And so more resources is always great. Things like Treehouse have popped up recently. The price that you pay for that is nothing compared to one college course.
Three credit college course.
Right. If I could just take that course out and section off my tuition and just cover that one, nothing still. It's like $20 a month or something. Not that I'm trying to advertise it. I don't think I've actually ever used it. But even so, just the fact that there's widely available resources for people trying to get into this field, I think is great. And the field is starved for talent right now. Really, really growing quickly. Hopefully it's not like a bubble, or so I'll probably look back on this in 10 years and be like, damn it. But I think it's definitely a great thing. New people don't have a lot of places to turn, especially in terms of talking to people, getting news. I very much support it, and I hope this will continue.
Awesome, thank you so much. This was the Design News Network, our first interview here with Jeff Escalante at Carrot Creative. Like us on YouTube, and if you have any comments, down in the comment section below.